Hello, friends. Welcome back to Gecko's Gaming. I'm going to be reviewing some of the new cards, some of the new spoilers that are coming out. We'll taking a look at them, talking about a few picks that I think are interesting, and mostly how they relate to the new standard set, which is going to be pretty exciting. It'll be a whole new. A lot. We're losing a lot of cards. Power level is going to go down, but I think a lot of new options are going to unlock, and it's going to be pretty fresh. So first, let's take a look at this Weft Walking card here. This blue card enchantment. Blue, blue, 4, so 6 mana altogether. When this enchantment enters, if you cast it, shuffle your hand and graveyard into your library, then draw 7 cards. And the first spell each player casts during each of their turns may be cast without paying its mana cost. So this is kind of wild. It's like a time twister mixed with a soft omniscience that affects both players. But that second clause should be a lot more powerful for you because you just drew 7 cards and refreshed your hand. Um, However, it costs 6, and you only get to do the time twister effect if you cast it from your hand naturally. So no cheating it into play. I know what some of you were thinking. That's not what's going to happen with this card, unless you want to cheat it into play and then just use the Omni thing. But the idea is, I'm guessing you would build around this if you're going to play it. It's a very interesting card, but one of the main downsides is since you have to pay 6, then your opponent gets to use the Omni first. But then if you untap, you're going to be in a really good spot. So you either want to have a lot of mana or be in a stable board position. It's an interesting card. It definitely catches the eye. I'm not sure if it's going to be playable in standard, or if people will be able to find ways to break it. Um, some of these cards here are all pretty sweet. The Exalted Sunborn is quite powerful. I think I could see this being slotted into the mono white control type decks, the tokens ones. Exalted Sunborn is white white 3 for an Angel Wizard, 4/5 flying lifelink. If one or more tokens would be created under your control, twice that many tokens are created instead. And so if you can warp this for 2 and then still create tokens that turn, it seems okay. And then it gets suspended and then comes back as a 4/5 flying lifelink later. And I'm thinking about Carrot Cake kind of comes to mind. So what, on turn 4 you could warp this and then play a Carrot Cake or activate a Carrot Cake that you have out already. You get an extra token. It would play pretty well with Voice of Victory. Is that what it's called? The white 1/3 that mobilizes for 2 when it attacks. And that's probably the best application for it. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's going to be a little tricky to making the warp effective. But if you can make the warp work on this, then and get enough value for it to get through that turn, it's going to provide a lot of value. Because then later on, you just basically get a free 5 mana 4/5 flying lifelink, which those mono white control decks would be interested in anyways. This card looks pretty interesting too. Mental Modulation, blue 1 instant. The spell costs 1 less to cast during your turn. Tap target artifact or creature, draw a card. So I could see this being really good in a solid role player in like a blue red tempo deck. I think Swift Spear is rotating out, unfortunately, but good with that kind of stuff. Good with the that kind of blue red prowess with Drake Hatcher and Storm Chaser's Challenge maybe. But if you're in a more aggressive type of deck, if you're looking to cantrip and get in damage, this could be cool. And the flexibility is nice, where you can, you get the most value out of a tap if you cast it at your opponent's turn. Usually at the beginning of combat, so it gives you that option. You still get to draw a card if you're in a race in that way. But then if you do it on your turn, like tapping their you tap their creature, you're triggering your prowess stuff. You're getting through with the Drake Hatcher. You're triggering Drake Hatcher, um, and you're getting to draw a card on all at the same time. So this one looks really interesting. I'm going to be trying this in some tempo decks. Here's Arch Enemy's Charm. This is obviously interesting for us mono black players. Um, this card, I think it's basically it has versatility, But at the end of the day, how I would think about this if I was building a deck is that this is a removal spell with upside. It's a powerful removal, but it's an expensive removal spell with additional upside. The reason I'm thinking about it that way is because the that's what you're going to be using it for most is that exile effect. I guess I'll read the card. It's triple black, instant. Choose one. Exile target creature or planeswalker. Return one or two target creature and or planeswalker cards from your graveyard to your hand. Or put 2+1/+1 counters on target creature you control and it gains lifelink until end of turn. So this is going to be at home in a black mid-range deck that's maybe more aggressively slanted, most likely. Or not aggressively slanted, I mean more controllingly slanted, more of a slow black mid-range deck. Sorry, I misspoke there. The biggest downside, I think, is that there's nothing really proactive that you can do with it. Like, you would really want a card like this to have the mode where you draw 2 cards, lose 2 life, or something like that. That would make it like an all-star, because it has that proactive mode where you can just kind of do it on turn 3, do it on turn 4, if there's nothing going on to advance your game plan. Otherwise, if you're casting it on turn 3, you're often going to be trading down in terms of mana, and you'll be losing tempo. So that puts a cap on how many of these I think you can play in your deck. It is nice as your top end unconditional removal spell that has a little bit of upside of different things. Returning the creatures and planeswalkers from your graveyard to your hand should come up sometimes, but that's going to be a late game thing. So the card is its card's kind of dirty in that respect. Putting 2+1 counters on a creature you control and getting lifelink, that'll be helpful in arrays. It's nice that the 2 counters stay around, so it provides some permanent value, and that it's instant. So you'll probably get some good blowouts on that if you're like a black mid-range creature deck. The unfortunately, there's just not a lot of good planeswalkers right now to get back, so you're mostly going to be creatures. I think Liliana, the 3-mana Liliana, is rotating out, and I haven't seen a good planeswalker yet to replace it, so a little rough there. But the 5-mana Ashiok is not exciting. The 6-mana Liliana gets pretty expensive for that kind of stuff. But yeah, this should be good in a black mid-range deck with creatures. And, it's sort of a Gix's Command, miniature Gix's Command, so that's cool. Up next we have Sothera, the Super Void. Now this card is just very interesting. Double black and 2, so 4 mana altogether for legendary enchantment. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent chooses a creature they control and exiles it. At the beginning of your end step, if a player controls no creatures, sacrifice Sothera, then put a creature card exiled with it onto the battlefield under your control with 2 additional +1/+1 counters on it. So this card has a very powerful effect, obviously. You have to take off a turn, you have to pay 4 mana, you have to put it into play. Hopefully at that point you already have some kind of ways to sacrifice creatures. The first thing that comes to mind is Sephiroth. I think there's a new card in the set that costs 2 and it's a 3/2 and it lets you sacrifice a creature to surveil 1. I think again it's at no mana. So with this card, to maximize it, you're really looking for ways to sacrifice creatures for no mana. So Sephiroth obviously comes to mind. Sephiroth, if you curve like a 1 or a 2 mana thing that you're willing to sacrifice into Sephiroth, and then into this on turn 4, when you attack with the Sephiroth, you'll sacrifice your creature, draw your card, and then this triggers before they get to block. So oftentimes you're going to have a fine attack there with Sephiroth on turn 4. And just the biggest thing to think about though is that it's not capped. Like sometimes they put cards like this where you can only trigger once per turn or so many times per turn. But this is whenever a creature controls dies, they exile a creature. Like, you could just stop the card there without the second half of the text, and we're talking about a very powerful effect. And the fact that there's ways to sacrifice creatures in standard for free, I expect this card to see some play at first. We'll see if the metagame shakes out in such a way. you can see this being mitigated by a meta that's high in um, you can see this being mitigated by a meta that's high in control or high in tokens, or where blue black tempo continues to punish you for tapping out for 4 mana, that kind of thing. But you're going to put this in a deck where you're going to be spamming the board with creatures early on. So it the deck building requirements to put this in your deck in the first place sort of implies that you may have time to cast it on turn 4, because you should be ahead on board, or like at least at parity, by casting small creatures that replace themselves and things like that. In an aristocrats deck, the second half may not come into play all that often, but you really don't need it to for it to be good. And but yeah, I mean, it's this card. I'm going to try this, and I'm going to be trying this with Sephiroth, and that's one of the first things I'm going to try in the new format, I think. So stay tuned. This is a pretty sweet, powerful card. It's funny because it reminds me of the Abyss from old school Magic, if you know what I mean. Pinnacle Star Cage. So this is a artifact, cost white, and 1, so 3 mana. When this artifact enters, exile all artifacts and creatures with mana value 2 or less until this artifact leaves the battlefield. And then for white, 6, you can put each card exiled with this artifact into its owner's graveyard, then create a 2/2 robot artifact token for each card put into a graveyard this way, and you sacrifice the artifact. So a little bit of upside late game. You can get some. You can put the creatures in their graveyard, which will usually be an advantage, because having an artifact out is kind of a like liability. Like, it gives you the ability to kind of put those creatures away and not have to worry about it anymore if they have an abrade or something to remove your artifact. But yeah, this is clearly just a temporary lockdown replacement. It is an artifact, so artifact tends to be easier to destroy than enchantment, something to keep in mind. It doesn't hit enchantments, and planeswalker. I don't think there's any 2-mana planeswalkers anyways, but it doesn't hit enchantments notably. And but it has a strong upside to make up for the fact that it doesn't hit enchantments for control and other decks that are interested in going into the late game, which is basically any deck that's playing this card, I would imagine. This is kind of annoying in my opinion. I was not a big fan of temporary lockdown in the first place. It feels like it casts a shadow over standard for too long, and it kind of turns into this cheesy game of like, do you have the enchantment removal after they cast it? And if you do, they lose, and if you don't, they like they win probably. I don't know, but yeah, it felt like it cast a shadow over standard for too long. Temporary lockdown did. I was looking forward to it rotating, but I guess they're kind of making this sort of an evergreen effect now, which is fine. It keeps aggro honest, and like spammy tokens decks and things like that. But honestly, those decks, aggro decks, already got nuked by the bans, and they're like struggling to stay afloat right now. So it feels a little bad, but whatever. It is what it is. Next up, we have Alfariel Stone Chosen. Black 3 for a legendary creature, human cleric. And he's a 3/3. He has Ward, discard a card at random, and then Void. Whenever Alfariel attacks, if a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn or a spell is warped this turn, defending player loses half their life, rounded up. So obviously this is another unstoppable slasher type of effect. Notably, the slasher trigger, it triggers an attack rather than doing damage, so that's pretty dangerous for the opponent. Like, you can, in theory, just sort of attack with this and kill them before they have a chance to block. But a condition must be met first. And I don't know that, like, the void is not, it's not nothing to trigger that. This again maybe in an aristocrats type deck or something, but it's understated and expensive. The ward is nice, but I don't see myself playing this in standard anytime soon unless there's some kind of a crazy combo with it. I don't want this in demons decks or in slasher decks because it's too slow. Although, maybe as a top end with a bloodletter, you could play like 1 or 2 of these just to try to get that. But just triggering the void, I don't know how, that doesn't seem free. And demons is not set up to do that right now. So it's an awkward card, but I do want to point out that the war discard a card at random harkens back to what used to be a common mechanic in Magic, like in Hymn to Torok and stuff, of discarding a card at random that we haven't seen in a long time. Not that I've noticed in modern set design, they don't like doing discard a card at random because A, it can hit your lands if you do it early and proactively out of your hand, but B, it just feels bad. You know, it adds an extra layer of variance to the game. Uh, but notably, this card, the discarded card at random trigger is a reactive thing. Like you can't really choose when it happens, and your opponent gets to choose. So it's a very conservative way to reintroduce random discard to modern card design, and I'm going to keep an eye out. Can we expect a Hint to Torok reprint in the next set? I don't know. Probably not. That was a silly question. But all right, next up we have Consult the Star Charts, which this card looks awesome in my opinion. Um, it's blue white for an instant with a kicker of blue and did I say blue white? I meant blue and one. It's blue and one for an instant with a kicker of blue and one. So you can pay it for two or you can pay it for four. And it says look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of lands you control. Put one of those cards into your hand. If the spell was kicked, put two of those cards into your hand instead. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So this is just an incredible cantrip with also like a card draw engine and also kind of like a digging tutor almost if you get into the late game. Where if you get into the late game, you can start digging for 6, 7 cards into your deck to find what you need, all at instant speed. It's flexible. It has a high upside, reminiscent of Dig Through Time, one of the most powerful card draw spells ever made. But it can also be cast on turn 2, unlike Dig Through Time, just to smooth out your draw. So that's a great option there. Instant speed plays well with counter magic. The downside on this card comes probably in like the mid game where turn 2, 3, 4. It's a little awkward. It kind of is like what was that? There was a spell in Standard that rotated out recently. It was blue 2 to look at the top 4 and choose 2, put it in your hand, and then it had flashback for 7, I think. So if you're comparing it on value to that, it's a little undercosted if you're casting it in the mid game because you're just paying 4 mana to look at the top 4 and choose 2, which is still good. I mean, it's just not exciting. But due to the incredible flexibility of the card and the high ceiling, I will be jamming 4 of these in control decks right away without fear. I think it's going to be a staple in blue control decks throughout the format. Yeah, I'm going to do it like this now so that you can see the card better. But yeah, Consult the Star Charts is off the charts in terms of its playability in Standard as a control staple. Gonna be a very strong card, I think. All right, next up, I just wanted to call attention to Cosmo Grand Zenith, which is a strong card, strong effect, serviceable casting cost, not very expensive. You can play this as a top end in like a low curve deck, but it's white and 2 for a 2/4 human soldier. When you cast your second spell each turn, choose one. Create 2 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens, or put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So I can see this being strong, and it sort of just rewards you for playing Magic in the first place. Like if you build your deck correctly and have a low curve, you're going to be doing this frequently anyways. You can do it on your opponent's turn too. It's not prohibited to just your turn. So you can do this like each turn cycle. I could honestly see this being paired with some blue cantrips and things like that for an interesting deck, like play with Opt, Sleight of Hand, that kind of thing. Or just like as sort of like a top end in a tokens deck or like an aggressive mid range deck, or even just an aggressive deck. It doesn't even have to be mid range. Next, we have 0 Point Ballad, which is black and X for a sorcery. Rare. Destroy all creatures with toughness X or less. You lose X life. If X is 6 or more, return a creature card put into a graveyard this way onto the battlefield under your control. So the first thing that jumps out about this card is its obvious comparison to Toxic Deluge, which is one of the strongest sweepers ever. Toxic Deluge is black X sorcery. All creatures get -X until end of turn, and you lose X life. And um, so this it has some pretty clear downside relative to Toxic Deluge. For one thing, it allows indestructible creatures to survive, since it says destroy all creatures. It doesn't actually lower their toughness; it just destroys them if their toughness meets the requirements. It also allows. It also has the downside of like you can't just pair it with a burn spell to take out a big creature, like with Toxic Deluge, because it doesn't give them. It doesn't lower their toughness. It just destroys them if their toughness is X or less. Um, but it's a pretty big upside if you can get up to 7 mana if you are a control deck. However, when you get up to that point, you likely don't have 6 mana, or if you have that much life to spare when you have 7 mana in a control deck, you likely are doing okay anyways. So the good thing about a sweeper is in general is that it can catch you up when you're behind, but this one doesn't have as much ability to catch you up when you're behind because you have to pay so much life. But if you do, it's notable that you don't have to do it for 6. Just because you have that much mana, you can still do it for 3 or 4 if you need to, just not get the upside. I think it's an interesting card. You'll probably see play just because there's not a lot of black sweepers that are cheap right now. Deadly Cover Up is reasonable for sure, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I think this card will see some play, but I don't expect it to be super popular. It's probably at its best in kind of a rampy deck where you can afford to pay the life. You have somewhat of a proactive game plan, but you can also get the X to be really big. We'll see. Next is Annul, which is a reprint. Powerful reprint, powerful classic card. I think it was first from the Urza's block way back in like the late 90s. But it's single blue instant counter target artifact or enchantment spell. Straight up, just powerful reprint. It's gonna be good in standard. It's gonna be a staple in standard sideboards, probably for the duration that it's in standard. Notably, it counters the Overlords, which is big game, I think. And unfortunately, it also pretty hoses Unholy Annex pretty good. So that's rough. I'm not happy about that. But yeah, it's nice having a null in standard. It's a flexible card. It hits a lot of things. Endstone is next. So again, this is a very powerful finisher. It's 7 mana legendary artifact. Whenever you play a land or cast a spell, draw a card. And at the beginning of your end step, your life total becomes half your starting life total rounded up. Okay, so the rounded up part I don't think matters because your starting life total is 20. It's always going to be 10. But this is a powerful finisher for a top end control deck or ramp deck, and probably at home mostly in a ramp deck. The second ability is really interesting. I mean, at the beginning of your end step, your life total becomes half your starting life total. So this may read like a downside, but it will almost always be an upside when you're casting a 7 mana card that takes over the game and drowns your opponent in card advantage. Because you're going to be wanting to catch up. Imagine that you're at 3 life and you cast this and your opponent has a board that can, do 5 damage to you. You're going up to 10 and the game gets out of reach really fast. Like, you're going to be gaining life with this more often than not. If you do have to pay life, that's okay too. That means that like you're in a stable position, and then the card advantage that you get from this is going to mitigate the life that you have to pay. But notably, you're not getting above 10. So if your opponent can deal 10 damage to you in a turn, it's gonna, they're gonna be able to. But the window for that is very small, since every card in your deck after you cast this is going to draw you another card, whether it's a land or a spell, and you're gonna really quickly close the door on anything that they can do. They have to do 10 damage to you in a turn, which is hard to do. and it becomes more and more hopeless the longer that this is out, as you just amass resources. And like I said, this is going to be more often than not a life gain spell when it matters, and when you pay life for it, it's not going to matter that much, except in a very fringe situation where your opponent can do exactly 10 to you or something. All right, so this is what we got so far for 1 mana removal. Not exciting. We were hoping that there'd be a reasonable replacement for cut down. This is not that. It's a sorcery stab, but it's not going to be. I mean, it's not good enough on its own. It's not going to be really playable, except as like a solid role player. If you do have like a void theme deck that works, which maybe there is something like that that'll work. I haven't done too much digging into the format to find out yet, but we'll see. But yeah, this is not a replacement for cut down. It is disappointing. Hopefully, but it does. Like I said, it has applications in a deck. If you can trigger void consistently, then it becomes pretty good. Actually, 1 mana to remove basically any creature. Not a replacement for cut down though. So, Elegy Acolyte. Black 2 for a lifelink human cleric creature, 4/4. And yeah, it has lifelink. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you draw a card and lose 1 life. And then it has void at the beginning of your end step. If a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn, or a spell was warped this turn, create a 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token. So Elegy Acolyte is a discount store Gix replacement. It's more expensive than Gix. It caps at 1 card per combat, unlike Gix, who let you draw as many cards as you deal damage to them. The upside of having lifelink and making a 2/2 sometimes, I don't think makes up for the downside. I don't think this card's going to be very playable in standard. But we'll see. Next up, Depressurize. Black 1 for an instant. Target creature gets -3/-0 until end of turn. Then if that creature's power is 0 or less, destroy it. This is an interesting removal spell. It kind of flips removal on its head, where usually high toughness creatures are more resilient to removal, but this punishes the creature for having low power. And this can trade above rate with, I think, a lot of creatures. There's like 5 mana 4/5s and 3 mana 3/4s and things like that running around. It's not a replacement for Go for the Throat. We're losing Go for the Throat, and that is gonna hurt black decks quite a bit. So far, we're not seeing ample removal of this, and the card I just showed you. Where is it? Yeah, Tragic Trajectory. These are what we're looking at so far for like 1 or 2 mana removal spells, and then there's the triple black one I showed you earlier. So black is not. So far, we're not seeing the removal adequately replace what we're losing for black, which is going to hit the Demon's deck hard. It's going to hit the blue-black deck hard. Although they have like they have tempo-y ways to take advantage of it. But it's also going to hit like blue-black control, I think. Unless maybe there's still a spoiler that'll come out, but this card, like we're going to be playing Shoot the Sheriff, which is just often just fails at what it needs to do. So I could see, depending on the metagame, this being in the mix. It's not exciting, but it might get the job done. It's easy to cast. Black 1 instant, has some flexibility. It also has like a much higher floor than Shoot the Sheriff, where you can use it as a combat trick, and you can use it on any creature, and so yeah, and you can double it up with maybe stab or something like that if you need to. No, actually, no, that doesn't work. And no, it actually does. If you stab, because it lowers their power too. So you gotta double up on these type of effects. There may be a thing for that. Like, we're going to be incentivized to play stab at this point, it looks like, since, and in case you don't know, stab is black, instant speed, target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. And we're going to be incentivized to play that card since cut down's out anyway, so maybe that makes depressurize go up. But yeah, this is I think it's going to be very strong and limited. It may be just relegated to that or a fringe playable in standard. All right, next up we're going to take a look at Cosmogoyf, which is pretty exciting card. I know it jumps out at you right away because we all know Tarmogoyf, and this looks a lot like Tarmogoyf. But this is not Tarmogoyf. It's black and green, so you got to have specifically those two colors instead of green one. And then B, the creature's power is equal to the number of cards you own in exile, and toughness is equal to that number plus one. So it's green-black for a creature elemental Lurgoyf. Its power is star/star plus one. And then, its toughness is star plus one. Its power is equal to the number of cards you own in exile, and toughness is equal to that number plus one. So Tarmogoyf said that its star was equal to the number of card types in graveyards. So you could play it on turn 2, and it would often be like a 1/2, and then it would kind of start growing throughout the game. Maybe on turn 3 you can make it a 2/3, and then up and up and up from there. Obviously in Eternal formats, it's going to be a very big, very fast, but in standard that's not the case with Tarmogoyf. But Cosmogoyf, it's not Tarmogoyf. It's going to be small. It's going to be a 0/1 on turn 2. And then it's going to grow slow from there. It's going to start off small and it's going to stay small longer, unlike Tarmogoyf, which sort of just rewards you for playing Magic. This you have to build around. The obvious thing people are going to try with this is Ketramos, which is it's black, white, 1 creature, legendary creature. It's a 4/4. I think it's indestructible, lifelink, and death touch, but you need to have 7 or more exile cards for it to attack or block. So people are going to try to jam this with Ketramos. Ketramos also has an additional ability where it lets you draw a card when you exile something on your turn. So maybe there's something there. If you can make the Abzan mana work, the green, black, white mana work, there might be something there. But this is, I don't think this card is super exciting, even though it does harken back to one of the strongest creatures ever. Okay, next we have Sunset Saboteur. This card looks cool. It's very interesting. Black 1 for 4/1 creature human rogue with menace. It has ward, discard a card, and whenever this creature attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature an opponent controls. So that's the downside of it. This is a very pushed in terms of stats and keywords. 2 mana, 4 easy to cast. 2 mana, like not double black. It's black 1. 2 mana, 4/1 menace, ward, discard a card. Thing's gonna be tough to race if you're an aggressive deck. And obviously it's good if you think you can win the race. It also helps you win the race, having such high power and evasion. It'll pair well with black removal spells if they try to hold back their blockers to get value from your +1/+1 counter and then to hope to block it. But each time you attack, you're making the opponent's attack bigger, so they probably won't. It pairs well with black unconditional removal because you can just remove the creature that they're doing it. But I think this is going to be most likely like a solid sideboard card for like against control decks and things like that. It might be main deckable in certain decks. I'm gonna be taking a look at this card, but like I said, I expect it to be a solid sideboard option against control that's relying on spot removal. What else do we have here? Let's take a look at Mightform Harvester. Green 2 for 4/4 insect druid creature. Landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, double the power of target creature you control until end of turn. It has warp for green and 2, meaning you can cast it for 3. It enters for that turn, and then at the end of the turn it's exiled, and then you can recast it for its mana cost at that point. So, yeah, if you warp this, like if you have an elf, you can warp this on turn 3 and then make a land drop, double some creature's power. Otherwise, you can. Otherwise, you can play it just for as a 4/4, which is fine too. I think this. There's obviously the mono green landfall deck where this stands out as an option in, and it turns all your creatures into potential Tifas, although it does not give them trample. So you still got to do the trample, get the work on that. But it it can crew a lumbering world wagon, which I think is crucial, especially with the warp part. You can crew the world wagon and then double its power when it gets a land, and you can do that all pretty fast and then still do something else in the same turn. So I see this doubling up with lumbering world wagon as a good combo. However, it does need trample. If you see my last video where I played in the qualifier weekends, I played against an opponent who had a very interesting take on the mono green deck that was playing World Wagon. It was mono green landfall with Saz's Chocobo and that whole package, but it and Bristly Bill, but it played Lumbering World Wagon, and it played a artifact that costs 2 that you can tap to give something trample. I think it like taps for mana or something like that, and then it can tap to give something trample, and then whenever the creature you give it trample deals combat damage to a player, you can draw a card. So that with this plus World Wagon, I think this could be a thing. Perhaps the cost is prohibitive, but the ability to warp it mitigates that. And then also the green deck ramps pretty good too. So yeah, I'm going to keep an eye on this, and I may try to replicate the deck that I played against in that event. See if I can reverse engineer it and add this to it. And yeah, it looks pretty sweet. So the Frenzied Beloth is just a straightforward. This is going to be a fine card against blue control decks if you're deep green. Double green, 3/2 beast creature. This spell can't be countered. Trample and haste. Creature spells you control can't be countered, and combat damage can't be prevented. So notably, it's good against like blue stuff, but it doesn't have any kind of protection from removal. So most control decks are going to be able to answer this pretty easily, anyways. But something to have on your radar, I guess, as a potential blue sideboard card. All right, and we're closing in. I think this is the last card I want to talk about today, and this is Tezzeret, Cruel Captain. It's a 3-mana artifact, or not 3-mana artifact. It's a 3-mana planeswalker, just generic 3, no colors. Legendary planeswalker, 4 loyalty it enters with, and whenever an artifact you control enters, you put a loyalty counter on it. And first ability 0, untap target artifact or creature. If it's an artifact creature, put a +1/+1 counter on it. -3, search your library for an artifact card with mana value 3 or less. Mana value 1 or less. Reveal it, put it into your hand, and shuffle. And then its ult is -7. You get an emblem with at the beginning of combat on your turn. Put 3 +1/+1 counters on target artifact you control. If it's not a creature, it becomes a 0/0 robot. So that's pretty strong. Ultimate. It's not the type of ultimate that wins the game immediately, but you can see how with this card you can get up to it really fast. Because if you have cards that are putting in multiple artifacts per turn, or even if you're casting multiple cheap artifacts per turn, he's going to get high fast. There's no cap on the artifact you control enters. So he can't plus himself, but he will go up quite quickly if in the right deck. I think this looks like a strong planeswalker. It's 3 mana, easy to cast, no color prohibitions. Strong in an artifact stack, high loyalty relative to the low casting cost. It impacts the board if you have a creature. Lets you untap, like maybe you had a creature who's like a mana dork or something that attacked or something, and then you get to untap it and then put a +1/+1 counter on it. It's a good blocker. It does require you to have something else in play, so it's not a huge house, but this is going to go in the type of deck where your deck is basically all artifacts. So I see this being strong. Like I said, it has a high loyalty cost for the mana cost, and its loyalty can go up very quickly. And the tutoring effect should be pretty nice too. I mean, it opens up toolbox options for lots of interesting things. Like, you can imagine a Soul Guide Lantern or a Ghost Vacuum, or there's probably lots of good 1-mana artifacts you can find to get this to do with this, and you can get creatures with it too. So as long as it's an artifact creature, so I think it's going to be strong. Um, notably, I think the 0 has to be good. Is the key to this card? Is you got to be able to untap. You want to have a low curve of artifacts and creatures that, preferably artifact creatures that you can put a +1/+1 counter on. And if you can find artifacts that tap for mana, that's going to be very good too. Artifact creatures that tap for mana specifically. So, anyways, that's all I have for you for today. Looks like a pretty cool set. I'm interested to see what happens with Standard. This is by no means an exhaustive review of all the cards. I've only just started glancing at this recently since I'm done playing the qualifier Standard. I had tunnel vision on just ignoring the spoilers for a while and just focusing on Standard. But now that I'm done, I'm just taking a quick glance through some of these cards, and these are some of the ones that stood out to me and I found interesting. By no means an exhaustive list, and please let me know if there's any cards that you like that you would like me to take a look at, or if you have any ideas on things that I missed here. Thanks again so much for watching the video. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. And yeah, thanks so much. Have a great day.